Welcome. Today we're going to do the chapter 14 part 2 notes. So this is the very first slide of chapter 14, but I already discussed these first two in the previous video. So we're going to fly through these. So chapter 14 is about money and banking. And the first two slides are really sort of about money in general, what it means to an economist. So hopefully you recall the medium of exchange. It's really the key point of what money is. And then throughout human history, we sort of evolved, if you will, from commodity money onto representative money. And today, almost all money, or really all money, is fiat money. That takes us to the last two slides with a little tiny bit on this one. So the history of banking in the United States. So how did money work and look, particularly in the United States over our history? So the textbook walks you through that. The text will do a better job than I will, so just go read it. But I'll just touch on the highlights. So really, we're talking about it first. We had the colonial era. Britain fights American efforts to coin our own money. So obviously, a real history of America from its earliest days always focuses on our struggle against Britain. And the American colonists, at least many of them, attempting to sort of claw power from the British monarchy and the British government, right? And so we create our own militias and our own armed forces. So that's one way to exercise power, of course. States were very interested in developing flags. The symbolism of identity was important. So anyway, there are lots and lots of ways that you always try to gain power or autonomy from someone else ruling over you, right? So sometimes that's our parents at home, and I'm going to try to extend my curfew, or say I'll pass curfew, or don't come in my room, or anyway, we're sort of constantly involved in these struggles, right? These sort of power struggles, from just individual experiences and examples like that on a daily basis to big picture societal fights, struggles over power occurring all the time throughout human history. Anyway, one of the ways that societies and governments and peoples have long sort of defined power, and a place where we have used the subject of money as a fight, as a source of autonomy. That, hey, if I have my own money, then I'm defining my own power. So in addition to our own governments or our own culture, our own food, our own all sorts of other ways that humans try to differentiate themselves from some other group of humans, society, tribe, government, whatever, money is fundamental to that, right? And so American colonists created their own money. Virginia had Virginia dollars, and Massachusetts had Massachusetts dollars. And it got even messier than that, because some towns would coin their own money, different banks would coin their own money. But at its core, the states, or at the time, the colonies, were each printing their own currencies. And Britain hated this, because Britain wanted everyone to use the pound, right? Because that's the British way of saying, no, we have autonomy, power over all of you. You guys don't get to go make your own stuff. Governments, constitutions, rights, responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. Money is one of those things. And states fought back, or at the time colonies fought back strongly against that and said, no, we're going to create our own money. So you had this struggle from the very earliest colonial days of American history. So fast forward, hey, we win, woohoo, go America. The revolution, right? And so now we're our own country. So now what? Are states going to create their own currencies, or are we going to have one strong national currency? And so we have this exact same sort of push and pull, tug of war, power struggle between states and the federal or central government of the United States, right? And some people, Alexander Hamilton, were very much in favor of a strong national bank, the Bank of the United States, one strong currency for the whole country. Other people, Thomas Jefferson, lots of others, anti-federalists, states' rights advocates. Anyway, they were often for states maintaining their own currencies, money supplies, at least in addition to a US currency, and so on. So you have these fights from 1800 to about 1860 between state chartered and federally chartered banks. Really, right, it's a states' rights, federal rights argument, and it goes back and forth. Different presidents, kind of push the ball in one direction or the other, and different Congresses. And anyway, money is obviously a much smaller subject of the fight between states' rights and national government than, a slightly more morally important issue like slavery. And so the ownership of human beings. Hold on, my daughter's coming. What's up, daughter? Look, it's my daughter on our Google slideshow notes presentation. Why are we in here and spilling milk everywhere? Okay, you're a fine American. What are we doing? All right, that's enough distraction for my poor econ class. They have to put up with me by themselves. They shouldn't have to put up with you. So here we go to continue. So slavery, of course, is the big states' rights issue, but money really does play an important part in this. And who should Georgia get to print its own money or whatever? Okay, so we have a definitive answer to who wins, the national or the state side of this, in the good old Civil War, right? 1861 to 1865. So this is really fundamentally an argument. What's happening? Fundamentally an argument. Total disaster. Alt F. There you go. I win. Sorry about that. My daughter has me all messed up. Anyway, the Civil War is clearly this struggle for the morality of the nation in terms of an anti-slavery national government, at least in theory, and pro-slavery southern states in the Confederacy that secede. And the national government wins 100%, right? So the South loses, the North wins, and the North really represents the federal government and nationalism and national. Anyway, it is a clear and decisive victory for no slavery, for one national U.S. currency. And also, sort of a side note, see if that works. The first fiat money ever issued in the United States was issued in the Civil War. They were called greenbacks because it's the first time in American history that we actually have green ink printed on the back of our money. People always think money is green. I don't know, pull out a dollar bill and look at it. It ain't green. Now the ink on the back is green, but the ink on the front is almost entirely black ink. But anyway, greenbacks get coined as a term back in the Civil War. It's the first time government just starts issuing money without silver or gold to back it up. And why would that be? Well, because wars are expensive, of course, right? And so Lincoln sort of runs out of money. Oh my gosh, how am I going to buy more mules and rifles and bullets and food for the troops and pay them? And I'm just going to make up money. I'm going to say that the U.S. government can just create a piece of paper, throw some green ink on the back, call it $1, and say this counts to buy some bullets from you, factory owner, even though there's no gold for this one. Oh my gosh, does that work? Why would that work? Well, if the factory owner accepts it, then the U.S. government can take its bullets or whatever, and the factory owner gets a piece of paper, which may or may not be worth anything. It's worth something, right? If the factory owner, the bullet owner, can take that dollar and turn around and buy food for his family with it, or pay his employees with it, or go off to the supplier of brass and pay him with that dollar bill piece of paper, right? So he can get more supplies, we can make more bullets. Anyway, if the brass factory person accepts that dollar bill, because they can pay their workers or pay their taxes with it, which is important, and Lincoln says they can. Anyway, so fiat money just works the very first time it's issued in U.S. history, but it doesn't last past the war. So we go back to a representative money. Money is all backed by silver until sort of the 50s, sort of the 70s. Complicated. Okay, anyway, so that's the Civil War story of money. After 1865, slavery is gone forever, moral victory for the U.S., and a central government, one strong U.S. currency exists forever, right? Slightly more complicated U.S. history, of course. So Reconstruction in the South, Jim Crow. I mean, in effect, slavery comes back in the South in almost every horrifying aspect, and to a far lesser moral degree. But you see that same sort of struggle and fight for autonomy and power and sovereignty between federal government and state governments played out in the realm of money as well. And so states start coining their own money again, printing their own money. There are again Texas dollars and Georgia dollars by the 1880s. And then there are Illinois dollars, because the northern states start doing the same thing too. So we do have one U.S. currency for this second half of the 19th century, 1870s, 80s, 90s period. But we also have a proliferation, an explosion, lots and lots of local states printing their own money. Okay, fast forward then through sort of that era to I'll do better this way. 1913, big important date in the history of money in the US because this thing called the Federal Reserve Bank is established. So Woodrow Wilson is president. World War I is coming along. There is a strong pull push for much stronger national government at the time. And Wilson sort of embodies that, the progressive era, if you remember that from US history class. Anyway, there's really a push to sort of finish the Civil War in terms of money, not yet really in terms of race, although you do have the creation of some of the stronger early civil rights movements beginning right around this time in the progressive era too. But at least as far as money is concerned, and lots of other issues, government's ability to control wages or environment or other laws of states. But anyway, in 1913, we establish the Federal Reserve Bank. And if you look at one of these things there, right, what's that say at the top? That is a Federal Reserve note of the United States of America. So still to this day, we are part of the Federal Reserve System in the United States. Our central bank is called the Federal Reserve. And we have students who very often serve on the Federal Reserve Board in St. Louis as a student advisor. Congrats to you guys. I'm jealous I never got to do that. But so anyway, we still have 107 years later this Federal Reserve System created. And really the structure and function of the US government and its relation to our money and monetary supply is very similar today. I mean, some changes have occurred, right? But the structure itself is basically what we got 107 years ago or so with the Federal Reserve creation in 1913. Anyway, there are bits and pieces of change throughout time to this federal system. It evolves and adapts. And one of the biggest changes happens throughout the Great Depression in the 1930s. Lots of bank failures. If you've ever seen It's a Wonderful Life, there's the famous black and white movie plays every Christmas. There's this amazing scene where people have a run on a bank. They all want to take their money out because they don't trust the bank. It leads to the bank's collapse. This happened writ large, like all over the country in the 30s with bank failures, and causes lots of economic catastrophe, deepens the crisis. So Roosevelt does all kinds of New Deal programs, of course, to attempt to save the country during the Great Depression. But one of those things that he does is create this program called the FDIC, or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Next time you walk into your local bank, if you're allowed to walk into local banks, thanks coronavirus. Anyway, there's a little sticker, I guarantee you, on your bank that says FDIC. So take a look for that, because your bank gets insurance basically for its money, that the US government gives free insurance on money. Like I think of my car as being insured or my house as being insured, but also my money in my bank is insured and I don't have to pay the insurance premium on it. I have no bill. The bank itself is automatically given free insurance by the US government through the Federal Reserve Board or the Federal Reserve Banks to protect all deposits up to $250,000. Anyway, it gets complicated, but we will talk more about that next chapter, chapter 15. I know, you can't wait. Okay, lastly, to conclude chapter 14, try to move that guy too. Move him over there. And I'll move me up here. How's that? What's banking look like today? So that's sort of a history of the last 100 years or so of banking. Now, where are we? So the second I put something on a PowerPoint or Google slideshow, it is out of date in terms of money today. Big picture wise, right, we still do have some of these things like the difference between checking and savings accounts. The primary difference, although these things can all vary a little bit depending on bank and so on, but savings accounts typically pay some interest, although these days a very small amount of interest often. Anyway, and checking accounts typically don't. On the other hand, it's much easier to say write a check or take money out of a checking account than a savings account with no penalties. Overdraft protection is a key idea there. That simply says, let's say I have $100 in my checking account. I write a check for $105. So technically that check should bounce. So when I go pay at the auto repair place for my flat tire, $105 bill, but I write a check out for it. When that check goes through the auto places bank, and then they come to my bank and say, hey, we need $105. My bank will go, oh, Schusky, that bum only has 100. Holy cow, it's supposed to give 105. What do we do? So if I have overdraft protection on my checking account through my bank, my bank will just throw an extra $5 in there and cover the bill, and then my bank will immediately contact me and hound me and say, you have 24 hours to put $5 more back in your account to make up for the debt that in effect they've lent me and so on. But anyway, overdraft protection can be very handy on checking accounts. Just to be a good consumer, make sure in your life when you're opening bank accounts, many of you I'm sure have one already, that you have things like overdraft protection on your checking account. Ask these questions. Okay, so this is why I say there is no keeping up with Google Slides annually on a money current banking practices version, because electronic funds transfers, or EFTs, have completely changed how banking looks over the last 20 years, but 20 weeks, it's changed. So the advent of computers and the way we can deal with money in electrons electronically has just vastly changed what banking looks like from most of my life. Actually, I'm for the first 30 years or so of my life, banking looked in a whole lot of ways like it did for all of my parents' life and really all my grandparents' life, right? Going back to almost 1900. Paper checks, stuff kept on account in banks, whether that's computer files or paper files or whatever, but like it all kind of works the same. Holy cow, now I have Cash App and PayPal, and I can transfer money via, my phone to someone sitting next to me or someone on the other side of the world. And I can buy stuff on Amazon with a click of a button on my phone, and all of that comes directly out electronically of my checking account or possibly a credit card. And then my credit card might be automatically paid with direct deposits from or direct payments from my checking account. On and on. Anyway, so the way that computer functions and the electronic funds transfer has overtaken banking is dramatic, right? We also have ATMs, simply an automated teller machine. I do not need human beings at banks anymore. I can go up to a machine, right, and put my card in and get cash out if that's what I need, or put cash in for a deposit if that's what I need. These days, I don't even use an ATM that often to make deposits. If I get a check, someone writes a check to me for $50 for, cutting their grass. I've never cut anyone's grass for $50, but theoretically, I take a picture of that check with my phone, and it automatically, through the app on my phone, is deposited to my account in my bank and taken out of their account at their bank. Crazy. So what on earth is money today? Well, on the one hand, it's these electronic funds, right? Unit 10 no longer hands me a check or hands me cash or whatever. Every other Friday, I get an email saying, hey, the deposit's been made. And then I get a text alert from my bank saying, whoop, cash deposited in your account. And then I pay all my bills, many of my bills, most of my bills online. I go to a website, I go through my app, I click some buttons. So anyway, we still, of course, have currency. People still carry around paper dollar bills and $50 bills. We still write checks. We have debit cards that represent that money in a bank. So that's really the fundamental notion of money: currency, checks, and checking accounts. But what about a credit card? I also have a credit card. Is that money? So it's not really, right? A credit card represents me borrowing money from someone else. So the credit card company or the bank that the credit card is issued through, they have money, but they have money in their checking account. It's just that, Chase has a massive bank account of $1 billion. When I go and charge $63 at Home Depot after school on, whatever, new gloves for my weed eater and stuff, I've borrowed $63 from my credit card company in effect. And I have to turn around and start paying that borrowed money back within the month, or I pay them interest. Although if I pay it off in full before the month is up, then I don't pay interest. Is how a credit card works. And we can talk more about credit cards if we'd like to get into what's good about them, because there are things that are good about credit cards, but also what's dangerous about them financially. So anyway, credit cards are not exactly money. They're really debt. So they represent money you borrowed from someone that you have to pay back. And then near monies are things that feel like money. My savings account sure feels like money, but I can't use my savings account to pay my Home Depot bill that moment. I might have to go to the bank, withdraw $63 from my savings account, and use that to pay for. So it's not quite as liquid, is the term, an asset as my checking account. So my checking account, I could use my debit card, write a check, whatever, pay for my Home Depot bill that second. My savings account, I would have to go through a step or two or three to get that money, possibly transfer it from my savings account over to my checking account, and then use my debit card to buy the Home Depot stuff after school today. So anyway, those are called near monies. Basically, if it takes a step or two or more to get to your cash, to get to your hard money. So that then leads to two measurements of money. And so M1 is a measurement of money that simply means all currency in circulation. M1 is all currency, hard money, paper bills, right, and coins, and all the money in our checking accounts, which is becoming ever more vast compared to actual printed money. So that's M1. So economists are interested. How much money is in America? How much money is in Mexico? How much is in Canada? How much is in South Korea? Whatever. So one way to think about that is M1, which is the narrowest definition of the money supply, and it's really cash and checking accounts. But then, of course, I think of my savings account as my money, right? And so economists then come up with a second way or a second measurement in addition to M1. And M2 is basically all of that stuff that's in M1 plus near monies. So M2 is always bigger than M1, like a math equation, right? M1 plus other stuff. And that plus other stuff includes savings accounts primarily, but also CDs, money markets. So that's a little bit of a look at what current banking practices look like in the US. Like I said, check out the textbook, chapter 14, read that chapter, look through it. It's smarter than I am, so hopefully you can learn something from that. Anyway, that concludes our chapter 14 notes. Chapter 14's over with these notes and a couple little other assignments maybe. So anyway, test coming at you before too long. So any questions? Shoot them at me. See you.